Before we begin, yes, I'm bald, don't ask me why. Huge thank you to Edmund for actually sending these pair my way so that, I can give you guys my honest and unadulterated review on the EPZ Q5. So, let's begin. Before we begin, a very specific thing I would like to talk about, because I've noticed a lot of people have talked about this already. This pair is a little bit, plagiarizing the design of a certain other pair of IEM. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to whether if the consumer enjoys this pair of IEMs or not. On the legal side, I would say yes, plagiarizing is wrong, but then again, that's a whole nother story from some other people. I'm just here to give you a very honest review on this pair of IEM so that you could, at least understand about this IEM, and if it's good, then, you could buy this IEM based off of what I'm saying. But then again, this is my opinion of this IEM, and all of my reviews on IEMs are very strict on one certain thing. I review them based on the price point, and for this EPZ Q5's case, it is retailing at $77 US, but if I'm not mistaken, I think you could probably get it for like somewhere around $50 US if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, with all that out of the way, I have one thing I would like to say. Y'all know my shtick, unboxing time, right? Other than the IEM being good, which is a spoiler, I hate this box, man. I really hate this box. Like, okay, this thing honestly looks quite nice, as you can see right here. Even my friends coming into my room right now, they'll be like, if I'm putting this like at a corner in my cupboard right here, they'll be like, wow, what kind of box is this? This looks so appealing, this looks so aesthetic. But yeah, it definitely looks aesthetic to the point where, wow, opening it up, it still looks quite aesthetic, right? That's when the inconvenience comes in. Okay, so if I'm opening it like this, how do you expect me to, like, take it out without, like, fumbling all over the place? The design is very human, I would say, because I unboxed this at a public place and it fell down. And so with this very nice box but with a very disappointing unboxing experience, I'll just let the B-roll do itself. I'm not really going to talk that much about the box anymore. Let's just talk about the accessories that they give, because at least they give something that I don't think I've rarely seen in IEMs. They give a microfiber cloth for your little IEM, which is a very nice touch, despite the fact that I hate the box really. And other than that, you get this very standard, like, the pleather case that probably comes in like certain KZ brands or something like that. Very standard, but quite nice and very, very functional. And you get two sets of tips. One is more like, I don't know how to say this, but it's more of a softer plastic version of the LeSure stock tips, and one is a more conical and softer rubbery type of ear tips, which it is more shallow, hence it'll probably brighten the treble a little bit. Personally, after me testing out both of the tips, I prefer this black one right here, because I don't know why, even though it enhances the treble, it also slightly polishes the bass a little bit more, which we'll talk about in a second. Now, in terms of the build quality, so going on to the build, this pair of IEM, I mean, y'all probably know by now, I think I've mentioned it just now. So this pair of IEM looks like that, and it is made of apparently what they call is a skin-friendly resin material. So apparently this whole thing is made of resin, which honestly, if I were to just take it off, and just hold it in my hand like this, it honestly feels quite solid. And it has this very nice accent of a design at the back. And yes, this thing is MMCX, so I'm a little bit conflicted because I don't really like MMCX that much, because of the fact that I have a few MMCX pairs of IEMs, and yeah, they sort of not work after like half a year or something like that, because of the you keep turning the terminals and stuff like that. But that's a heads up for people who use MMCX. But speaking of MMCX, the cables apparently are SPC, and of course it accents the whole aesthetic of the EPZ Q5. As you can see right here, it has this sort of gold orange type of, what's it called, this type of color accent, and on the connectors, on the terminations, and on the jack as well, you get all the same colors. So yeah, they do make quite a good design. Going on, talking about the fit, how does it fit? Good. I have nothing else to say other than this thing just fits just fine. I think every type of tip honestly just works just fine, especially the two stock tips, which is already a plus. But me personally, other than me talking about the sound of the two tips, which we will get into in a second, the reason that I also prefer this black tip, this black conical shallow neck tip, is because of the fact that, you know, it kind of allows you to make the Q5 sit a little bit deeper into your ear canal, which honestly, I've listened to this for 2 hours straight. It still feels very, very comfortable. There is no sort of like discomfort in my ear canal, which, you know, usually starts after 2 hours. Mainly, I'm pretty sure it's because of the tip being a little bit too soft. Not too soft, but you get the idea. I think this head shell unit's shape is honestly quite nice in terms of, like, you know, it contours perfectly to your ear, and, you know, if you want to have a little bit of a snug fit, just tug a little bit and, you know, it just kind of locks in to your ear's anatomy. That's it. And in terms of seal, it seals quite fine in this, and maybe a little bit less you know, the kind of like the Le Sueur stock tips. I don't know why, but I really just prefer this. But again, in terms of fit, I'm very sure that everybody has their own fit, so take that as you will. So with all that being said, let's just go into the sound part. This is the source that I use, and yes, I will be a little bit more specific on this because I use two sources, and this is a graph. Now, in general, this pair is more of a warm signature sound pair, but in terms of its tuning, where it's V-shape, U-shape, stuff like that, this is where I just want to mention it's a little bit special. Even though I say it's warm, it's only warm on, like, you know, the lower frequencies to like maybe 1K, and after that it gets more energetic, which kinda doesn't make sense, but kind of once I've explained it. The bass, due to the fact of its warm signature, honestly sounds very nice. And me personally, I prefer this short nozzles bass rather than, you know, the Le Sueur type of tips bass. The translucent tips are, you know, a little bit on the thinner side. I don't know how to say this. The bass is good, but it sounds a little bit thin. It doesn't have that much body as compared to this. But other than that, there is one very specific thing that I would like to mention before we move on. This is more on the technicality part, because I feel like this pair doesn't really have that much dynamics to begin with. I would say, no, not that, but basically if I listen to this on a low volume, and when I say low volume, I mean, like, you know, when I want to sleep, that's when I actually play music on a very low volume and, you know, just doze away. On low volume, on the Q5 specifically, feels a little bit less for some reason. I don't know why. It doesn't have that much of an impact, but at the same time, you could say that it's a win because you're trying to sleep. You don't want to, you know, have too much dynamicness to it. You just want to relax, if it makes sense. But yeah, take note of that for people who like to listen to songs on a very low volume. On a normal volume, I would say, you know, me personally, I listen on the M15s at a 12, so that's my normal. I feel like everything's fine. The sub bass on this pair honestly is quite good. It has adequate presence and very smooth rumble. The note definitions sound good, but for some reason it lacks a little bit in the bass lick part. Mainly because in good bass, I personally consider a good bass something along the lines of good tonality, good note definition. Does it have body? Does it sound very organic? This thing sounds organic, this thing sounds alright, but in occasional cases, it's not to the point where I would say it's muddy. Maybe in between muddy and clean. Like if it's a scale of 1 to 10, 1 is clean and 10 is muddy, it is sitting about at a 2.5. It sounds a little bit loose in certain cases, kind of like, you know, it's not really that well controlled in certain cases, but it still gets the job done in more ways than one. And in another way that I can see this, it might be a little bit of a, you know, a colorization of the bass. Take that as you will, but me personally, I feel like this is a little bit more of a nitpicking part. But then again, this is why I make a review, so that I can nitpick about all of these very specific little things that you want to know. But yeah, that probably covers the bass part. mids. How does it sound with the mid? If you like vocals, then I'm just gonna be very honest right here. This pair is probably not for you. The vocals or the male part, because you know, we guys have voices at a lower frequency. Everything sounds thin. Everything sounds very recessed, and everything sounds a little bit cold for some reason. I don't really like listening to parts like this, but yeah, that's how I feel when I listen to male vocals. Female vocals, on the other hand, are a little bit more lively, they are a little bit more energetic, but then again, it sounds a little bit thin as well, and also in very occasional cases, it sounds a little bit sharp, but not to the point where it is sibilant. Even on the M15, it is not sibilant, so I would say on anything else it would probably sound fine. Even though on the SH6 it still maintains its sharpness, like the S's and the X's, it still has a little bit of sharpness to it. I honestly don't feel like I like it that much. But what I do like about this pair is, even though the mids are a little bit recessed, and again, I'll just put the graph here again, y'all can see the mids are very, you know, dipping down. The instruments, the tonality on the EPZ Q5s, I'll just say because of the warmness, for some reason, it carries a little bit into here. Everything sounds natural, organic, acoustic is probably the best word to say it. I've never heard synths sounding that, I would say, bubbly, if it makes any sense. Things sound real, things sound lively, instead of like, you know, having some sort of like post-processing being done. That's what I've heard when I listen to the EPZ Q5. Everything from synths to guitars to pianos, everything just has that little bit of emotion to it, if it makes any sense. But speaking of instruments, one little thing I would like to mention about is guitars. I usually like to take anything from Polyphia just to test out the treble. And from then on, I realized there's a very specific thing going on with the EPZ Q5. During certain guitar shreds, like when it is at the lower parts of the fret, the shreds don't really shine for some reason. Everything sounds more smoothened out if it's within the mid-range to, you know, the borderline upper mid-range for some reason. I don't know why, but everything just sounds more rounded, as, you know, compared to its counterpart in play, which is the drums, the hi-hats, the cymbal, basically the whole drum ensemble, which, you know, probably segues very good down to the treble part and the upper mids part. Hi-hats, cymbals, rides, all of those are quite lively, quite bright, and again, it might also be because of the 5K peak that I mentioned. Even though you see that it's a little bit, you know, it's just like a little bump, it probably makes a lot of sense like why this thing sounds more bright in general. And especially at the treble part, everything probably sounds more lively, more energetic, but in very certain cases, it might sound a little bit too much. Maybe not heaty, maybe not splashy. Yeah, it's definitely not splashy, but it could have a little bit of that sibilant type of feel if you listen to, like, you know, to aggressive songs with, you know, very aggressive hi-hats going on. But other than that, everything is quite good. Treble extension is also quite good, and this is where I find this part to be a little bit of a feature. When we talk about extension, I'm mainly referring to something along the lines of, you know, decay as well. The decay sounds thin, but I feel like this is a good thing because it sounds very subtle, instead of like having a sort of a very reverby type of what's it called, a reverb type of feeling where, like, you know, it just covers everything else. The thinness of the decay just makes everything feel like it is more of a micro detail rather than, you know, something that is a part of this whole track, if it makes any sense. I consider this to be more of a unique thing rather than, you know, something that is more of a short end of stick type of thing. And speaking of all these detail things, micro details on the upper treble part are honestly a little bit more present than your general IEMs. Not talking about the EPZ Q5 and other frequencies or anything like that. I just mean the micro details on the treble part on the Q5s is definitely a little bit more present than your standard IEMs, mainly because of, again, might be the 5K peak. I'm not really sure, but, you know, if it elevates up that part, the neighboring parts are definitely also elevated as well. So I hope you get what I mean. Moving on to the technicalities part. I think there's only one word to summarize for everything. Fine. I really don't feel like the EPZ Q5 has anything that is quite outstanding in terms of its technicality, other than, you know, maybe if I just want to say something that I usually don't say, tonality. The tonality, the musicality, the enjoyment that you get from listening to the Q5 is honestly quite nice. But every time when I decide to actually critically listen to this pair of IEMs, I feel like the technicality part, I just don't know what to say about this. Everything is above average, very slightly. Nothing is wrong, but again, nothing is outstanding at the same time. It has quite okay soundstage for its price. It has quite okay separation and imaging for its price, and it is a little bit iffy on the dynamics like I mentioned. But like I said, on very normal volumes, it still is very okay. Only when, like, you know, it goes to the lowest volumes when you listen, it is a little bit funny on the bass region. But other than that, I still consider this pair quite an enjoyable pair. Why? Because despite the fact that me not being able to nitpick out the specifics of the treble part, the technicalities part, I still feel like this pair is quite an enjoyment piece. But despite me saying all of these, I still would like to say one thing at the end of this video. Because in conclusion, I feel like the EPZ Q5, even though for the technicality part it is quite normal, I think I've said enough for the bass mids and the highs. It is still a very enjoyable pair. It is very relaxing to listen to. It is honestly quite musical. It is quite fun to listen to. It is honestly quite enjoyable, and honestly for me, a palate cleanser than, like, you know, your usual analytical pair, technical pair, neutral pair. This thing at least makes me enjoy music and let me have that sort of emotion that I have than, you know, usually just listening to very analytical pairs. Which reminds me, I still haven't released a video for the EJ07. Maybe that'll be coming soon. Stay tuned, I'm not really sure, but I still have a few more IEMs coming up. But anyways, that's the end of the video. Again, huge thank you to Edmund Chan for actually sending this pair to me so that I can review this pair of IEMs. And honestly, again, this is quite an enjoyable pair of IEMs. I have nothing else to say. And to that, I just say, see you guys next time.